Joining me now, Republican presidential candidate and Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, good to see you tonight. So what did you think of the president's remarks, and do you believe he understated the ISIS threat?
Yeah, first he sets up a straw man, which is no one is saying they're going to overthrow the U.S. government. What we are saying is that in the process of attacking us, hundreds of thousands of Americans could potentially find themselves in situations over the next 10 years where they are threatened in one way or the other by what's happening here. That's the threat that they pose. This is a sophisticated group now who is figuring out how to use our immigration system to get fighters in here, not to mention growing their affiliate branches across multiple countries around the world. And they pose a very significant threat. Let me put it to you this way. They are the best funded, best organized, and fastest growing terrorist group in the history of the world. And they need to be confronted for what they are, a growing and looming threat. This is the same president that called them the JV team 2 years ago.
But his point is to go so far as to say this is World War III is what ISIS wants. They use it to recruit, and it's propaganda for them.
No one is saying it's World War III.
Well, no, I think Chris Christie has said it. Pope Francis suggested it. Well, others have said it.
Well, look, it's a very significant conflict that we have in our hands here, because this is a group that has figured out how to infiltrate fighters into our country and to radicalize Americans. In essence, American citizens born and raised in our own country who could attack us at any moment, as they did in Philadelphia last week, as they did in San Bernardino a month ago, and as they did in Paris 2 months ago. This is a very unique and significant and dangerous threat that we are now facing, and Americans are confronting, and it needs to be defeated with the seriousness that it deserves. Now, I think that, unfortunately, with this president, he has always underestimated the threat of ISIS. And I don't think you have to go to the extreme of using ridiculous examples in the language he uses tonight to understand that, yes, it is true that this is not a nation state, but it is a group that is acting like a nation state in many ways, as an armed insurgency, and it is a terrorist group, well organized, well funded, and capable of infiltrating the country.
What did you make as a U.S. Senator of the president's lamentations about tone in Washington?
This president has been the single most divisive political figure this country has had over the last decade. This is a president that has deliberately pitted Americans against each other time and again. Now, if he had given that speech in his second year in office, his third year in office, his fourth year in office, on some of those things he said tonight, it would have been a lot more useful. But this is a person who has gone around for 7 years telling people that Republicans don't care about those that are less fortunate, even accusing some of not caring about those that are disabled or the elderly, etc. He has used all sorts of attacks against Republicans and against the critics of his agenda. And now tonight he comes out with language of reconciliation. Well, in many ways, it's too late, because he has bitterly divided this country, and he's done so for political gain.
Let's talk politics for a minute, because since 1976, every single Republican nominee has won either the Iowa caucuses or the New Hampshire primary. The latest polls show you're a distant third in Iowa. You are fourth in New Hampshire. Is this thing slipping away from you?
No, I don't. I feel very positive about both of the states you just mentioned. We're in a pretty solid position in New Hampshire, consistently polling in second place, and in Iowa in a very strong third place, and growing in our support. And here's what I'm very confident of. When the votes start to count in about 3 weeks in Iowa and 4 weeks in New Hampshire, I feel very good about where we're going to be at the end of the process when the votes start to count. Voters in those states are paying very close attention to this campaign. They're starting to make up their minds just now, and I'm very confident about what that's going to mean for our campaign.
As you watched Nikki Haley give the State of the Union response tonight, you had to be thinking back to your State of the Union response, where you had a glass of water, you took a sip of water. It was a shocking moment to many.
She did great tonight.
What did you think when you saw her, and did it take you back?
No, well, yeah. We were joking about it right before going on the air, but she did fantastic. I thought she did extremely well, as I expected her to. She's very talented, and she was able to do it without a sip of water. That's pretty impressive. Do you think back to that one? Like, do you feel like you think you'd do it differently now? Do you need less water now that you're running for president? I don't know. It happens, whatever. I mean, the point is, at least we got our message across that night, and that's really what mattered. But I thought she did great tonight, and I thought she was the perfect person to deliver the response. And in fact, I'm sure she didn't know what the president was going to say, but her tone, her demeanor tonight, she talked about the South Carolina example of people coming together after a terrible crisis. I mean, showed real leadership as governor and showed real leadership tonight in her statement, and we're proud of her. Last but not least, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is coming up after you. She says you had to pick Governor Haley because the Republican Party has such a diversity problem. And you say? Well, I say the Republican Party has 2 Hispanics running for president, has an African-American running for president, has a woman running for president. We have more diversity than the Democrats have ever had in their field. And by the way, none of our candidates is a socialist, and none of our candidates is under FBI investigation like Hillary Clinton is. Well, that's diversity of its own kind. You may judge them too harshly. Great to see you, Senator. Thank you.